Imagine the myths we never believed suddenly coming to life. Ancient cities, once dismissed as fairy tales, are being uncovered. Weapons resembling legendary death rays actually exist, and creatures strikingly similar to unicorns, almost real. Today, 30 stories where reality turned out to be wilder than legend. Buckle up, it's going to be intense. Did you dream of the unicorn as a child? That radiant and noble creature? Well, the historical version of this legendary beast was less of a magical steed and more of a gigantic hairy rhinoceros. Meet the Elasmotherium sibericum, or the Siberian Unicorn. This prehistoric tank, which weighed up to 4 tons and roamed Eurasia, bore a single colossal horn right in the middle of its forehead. For many centuries, tales of this single-horned animal were dismissed as fables, but thanks to paleontology and unearthed fossils, its existence was finally confirmed. So yes, unicorns existed. They just wouldn't make for good images on a child's t-shirt. The poison maidens of India, Vishakanyas, served as a genuine, living biological weapon. The account of the Vishakanyas sounds like a plot for a thriller about ancient espionage. According to chronicles, beautiful girls in ancient Indian kingdoms were raised from infancy on a specific diet that included poisons and toxins. Over time, their bodies achieved full immunity, but their own bodily fluids became deadly to others. A single kiss or simple contact could result in a fatal outcome. This was long perceived as a mythological warning about ruinous women, but the records of the Maurya Empire testify that this was a functional and terrifyingly effective method of political assassination. The Kraken, a legendary marine predator said to be capable of dragging even a large ship to the bottom with its gigantic tentacles. For centuries, it was the main fear of sailors and remained just a cool story for everyone else. It turns out that old sea dogs weren't just spinning yarns. Although it was not a monster the size of an island, the legend was almost certainly inspired by the very real giant squid. These creatures, reaching 12 to 13 meters in length, have eyes the size of a dinner plate and tentacles powerful enough to cause serious damage to a wooden ship. In the Stone Age, complex brain surgeries were performed and patients actually survived them. This procedure was called trepanation, drilling, cutting, or scraping a hole into the human skull. Archaeologists have found numerous prehistoric skulls with such holes that clearly show signs of healing and bone regrowth. This proves that the operated individuals not only survived the barbaric procedure, but also lived for many years afterward. The goals varied, from treating injuries or epilepsy to expelling evil spirits. It is astonishing that our ancestors could perform such neurosurgical interventions using primitive flint tools. Women actually fought and died as gladiators in the Roman Colosseum arena. In 2000, a burial site was found in London of a woman interred with appropriate gladiatorial honors, including expensive pottery depicting combat scenes. Roman artifacts and written sources also confirm this. They describe women who entered the arena with swords, shields, and helmets, often fighting each other or even wild animals. They were not a sideshow. They were trained and fierce combatants. The Colosseum was not exclusively a men's club, and ladies entered the sand spilling blood for the roaring crowd. Herman Melville's famous Moby Dick is not a complete fiction. The novel about the vengeful giant albino whale was based on a real, extremely dangerous sperm whale named Mocha Dick. This whale was renowned among 19th century Pacific whalers for its colossal size, pure white color, and most importantly, its exceptional aggression. Unlike others of its species who tried to flee, Mocha Dick
actively attacked whaling boats and reportedly survived encounters with dozens of harpoons, becoming a true scourge of the maritime industry until he was finally killed.
The legends of the giant floating pleasure palaces of the mad emperor Caligula turned out to be true. Caligula, who even tried to make his horse a consul, was famous, among other things, for the story of two massive barges built on Lake Nemi. Reportedly, these were luxurious villas decorated with marble and mosaics, featuring systems of lead pipes for hot and cold water. For nearly 2 millennia, this was considered just another tall tale, until the lake was partially drained in the 1920s. The remains of two colossal ships were found there, which were significantly larger and more technologically advanced than anyone could have imagined for that era. The real story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin is not a pleasant fairy tale. Something incredibly creepy actually happened in this German town in 1284. The city's own records, dating back to the 13th century, state that on June 26th, a piper led 130 children out of the town, who then disappeared into a mountain and were never seen again. Although the magical flute is likely a later embellishment, the mass disappearance of the town's youth is an established historical event. Theories range from death during a plague epidemic to recruitment for a disastrous crusade. The point is that the myth is not the disappearance, but the supposed happy ending. The summit of Everest, the world's highest mountain, is entirely covered with marine fossils. For a long time, geologists considered this information absurd. How can the remnants of ancient ocean life be found at an altitude of nearly 9,000 meters? However, the top of the Himalayas, including Everest, is composed of marine limestone and is filled with fossils. This seems impossible until one recalls the titanic force of plate tectonics. The rock mass forming these peaks was once the floor of an ancient sea, which was thrust into the sky by the collision of the Indian subcontinent with Asia. You are literally standing on the roof of the planet, on territory that was once kilometers beneath the waves. The very existence of gorillas, the largest primates, was considered a myth in the Western world for centuries. Try describing a gorilla, a giant, powerful, hairy, wild man beating its chest in the jungle. It is not surprising that for over 2,000 years, Western civilization relegated tales of these creatures to pure fantasy. The Carthaginian explorer Hanno the Navigator mentioned a tribe of fierce, hairy people called Gorillae as early as the 5th century BC, but his report was dismissed. It wasn't until the 1840s that Western scientists finally obtained a skull and then a full specimen confirming that the mythical African savages were very real. Archimedes' Death Ray, a weapon that supposedly burned ships, turned out to be scientifically plausible. The story of how the Greek genius used a system of mirrors to focus sunlight and set fire to the Roman ships besieging Syracuse sounds like pure fiction. For a long time, it was considered propaganda. However, modern physics answers possibly. Experiments, including successful tests by MIT students, have shown that under ideal conditions, concentrated rays from polished bronze mirrors can ignite wood from a distance. Thus, the myth was based not on magic, but on physics, far ahead of its time. The formidable women warriors, the Amazons of Greek mythology, were real. The Greeks described them as a ruthless nation of female archers equal to any male hero. Historians long believed this to be mere fantasy, but excavations of Scythian burial mounds in the Eurasian steppes changed this view. Archaeologists discovered graves of women interred with full military gear, bows, arrows, swords, and daggers. Many skeletons bore traces of battle wounds. These were genuine women warriors from the very region featured in Greek tales. Scythian women fought fiercely,
side by side with their men. The legendary sea serpent was a real but very strange-looking fish. For centuries, sailors passed down tales of gigantic snake-like monsters that inspired terror. It turns out that most of these sightings can be attributed to the oarfish, the longest bony fish in the world. This fish can reach 11 meters, has a silvery, ribbon-like body, and a bright red fin that runs down its entire back, resembling a fiery mane. When oarfish surface, their undulating, unusual movements make them look exactly like the mythical sea serpent. The existence of pygmies, peoples of very short stature, was known even to the ancient Egyptians. For later Europeans, stories of people living deep in Africa sounded like pure folklore. However, the Egyptians knew they were real over 4,000 years ago. The most famous document is a letter from the young pharaoh Pepi II, around 2270 BC, in which he enthusiastically orders care for a dancing dwarf being brought from Central Africa. The Egyptians highly valued pygmies, and what Europeans considered a myth was a well-documented and appreciated reality for the ancients. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek computer, overturned the perception of ancient technology. The common belief was that complex geared mechanisms appeared much later. In 1901, a corroded bronze mass was recovered from a sunken ship off the island of Antikythera. Modern tomography revealed a shocking truth. Inside was hidden an intricate system of over 30 interconnected bronze gears. It was an analog computer used to predict the movements of the sun, moon, and planets, track eclipses, and even announce the next Olympic Games. Humanity did not see anything comparable in complexity for another whole millennium. The assassins were a real order of political murderers and gave rise to the very word we use today. For centuries, their story was considered a legend about a secret cult in the Middle East, supposedly intoxicated by hashish. However, the core of the myth is a terrifying reality. They were the Nizari Ismaili sect, operating from impregnable mountain fortresses like Alamut. They did not wage large-scale wars, but masterfully perfected psychological warfare through targeted political assassinations. Their highly skilled agents, the Fidai, eliminated caliphs and crusader leaders publicly, often at the cost of their own lives. The mention of hashish was likely enemy propaganda. They were sober, disciplined, and ruthlessly effective. The Nazca lines, giant geoglyphs visible only from the sky, were created by humans, not aliens. For decades, the most popular yet ridiculous explanation was ancient alien ingenuity. However, the truth, far more human and impressive, lies in the simplicity of the method. The Nazca civilization created these massive drawings simply by removing the reddish-brown stones from the desert surface to expose the lighter soil layer beneath them. This is landscape design on a truly enormous scale. The real mystery is not how they did it, but why? For astronomy, religion, or art? The destruction of Atlantis is highly likely a distorted memory of the real volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, which is modern Santorini. Plato's legendary island continent, which vanished underwater in a single day, was probably based on a catastrophic event around 1600 BC. This eruption literally tore the center of the island apart and triggered colossal tsunamis across the Mediterranean. The cataclysm annihilated the highly developed Minoan civilization on nearby Crete. The story of an advanced island culture erased from the earth by the sea as a result of a disaster sounds strikingly similar. Oracle bones confirmed the existence of the mythical Shang dynasty in China. For a long time, the Shang dynasty,
one of the earliest in China, was considered a myth, known only from later texts, with no archaeological confirmation. Everything changed when Chinese apothecaries began selling dragon bones as medicine in the late 19th century. A scholar noticed strange symbols on them, which turned out to be the earliest known form of Chinese writing. The dragon bones were actually turtle shells and ox shoulder blades that Shang kings used for divination more than 3,000 years ago. The inscriptions contained records of royal lineages and events that perfectly matched the legends.
The legendary city of Troy, the central setting of Homer's epic, was a real and brutal place. For millennia, Troy itself was considered as fictitious as the Greek gods who participated in the war. This lasted until the amateur archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann, obsessed with the epics, decided to take Homer's stories literally. In the 1870s, he began excavations in modern Turkey and found not one, but several layers of cities. One of these layers, now known as Troy, contained undeniable evidence that it was destroyed in a fierce war at roughly the same time the Trojan War was supposed to have occurred.
Rumors of secret chambers in the Great Pyramid of Giza turned out to be true. For centuries, the pyramid was surrounded by myths of hidden passages. Although many believed that everything that could be found had already been found, in 2017, scientists used advanced muon tomography, scanning with cosmic rays. They made a stunning announcement. They had discovered an enormous, previously unknown void, at least 30 meters long, located directly above the Grand Gallery. This finding, dubbed the Big Void, proves that even after 4,500 years of study, this famous structure still holds gigantic secrets. The biblical catastrophe of Sodom and Gomorrah was likely an airburst meteorite explosion. The canonical story of cities destroyed by a rain of fire and brimstone was long considered a religious metaphor. However, archaeologists at a site called Tal el-Hammam in Jordan found evidence of a prosperous Bronze Age city that was instantly annihilated about 3,600 years ago. The evidence points not to an earthquake, but to a catastrophic cosmic airburst, likely a meteorite, that exploded in the atmosphere with the force of thousands of atomic bombs. The explosion vaporized the city, melted pottery, and boiled the river water, which perfectly explains the biblical account of destruction by fire from the heavens.
Vinland, the mythical Viking settlement in North America, was found. Viking sagas which told of a fertile land far west of Greenland were considered boasting. The idea that Vikings reached North America almost 500 years before Columbus seemed implausible to most historians. However, in the 1960s, Norwegian researchers Helge and Anstein Ingstad, following the saga's clues, made a discovery that rewrote history books. In Lonsau Meadows in Canada, they found the remnants of a Norse settlement, sod longhouses and artifacts that were unmistakably Viking. The myth of Vinland turned out to be a historical truth.
The lost Roman legion may have truly ended up in China. The legend says that after the disaster at Carrhae, 53 BC, several thousand Roman soldiers were captured by the Parthians and sent east. They eventually served as mercenaries, fought the Chinese, were captured again, and settled in the village of Liqin on the edge of the Gobi Desert. Chinese records from that period mention the capture of soldiers who used the fish scale combat formation, a perfect description of the Roman testudo, or tortoise. Furthermore, recent DNA tests on Liqin residents revealed a high percentage of Caucasian ancestry. The lost city of the monkey god, or the White City, in Honduras was found using space technology. Legends of a lost metropolis of untold treasures in the jungles of La Mosquitia, Honduras, were long considered a fantasy. But in 2012, a team of researchers used aerial scanning technology, LiDAR, capable of seeing through the dense forest canopy. The scans revealed clear artificial outlines of an entire ancient city with plazas and pyramids that had been consumed by the jungle 500 years ago. A subsequent ground expedition confirmed the finding, uncovering artifacts including ceremonial seats depicting a jaguar man. Heraklion, the underwater Pompeii of Egypt, was a real but lost port city. For millennia, the city of Thonis Heraklion was known only from ancient Greek texts, including Herodotus, and was considered a myth. It was described as the main gateway to Egypt before the founding of Alexandria. In 2000, underwater archaeologist Frank Goddio surveyed the seabed in Abukir Bay and discovered it. Beneath a 10-meter layer of water and silt lay an entire, perfectly preserved city. Temples, colossal statues of pharaohs and gods, and sunken ships. It was not destroyed, but was simply swallowed by the Mediterranean Sea due to the unstable ground on which it was built.
The legend of El Dorado, the mythical kingdom paved with gold, was based on a real golden ceremony. Although the idea of an entire city made of gold was a fabrication, it originated from a real ritual of the Muisca people in modern-day Colombia. The ritual for anointing a new chief was incredible. The ruler was covered in gold dust, turning him into the Gilded Man, El Dorado. He was then taken by raft to Lake Guatavita, where he washed off the gold as an offering to the gods, while his subjects threw gold artifacts into the water. This single ceremony was greatly exaggerated by Spanish conquistadors, transforming it into a legend about a city, when in reality, it was a man.
Tales of the Cu Chi tunnels used by the Viet Cong were a reality. During the Vietnam War, American soldiers spoke of a phantom army that could appear and disappear as if by magic. To many, this sounded like a war myth born of paranoia, but the myth turned out to be an underground reality. The Viet Cong built the Cu Chi tunnels, a colossal interconnected network of passages more than 200 kilometers long. It was not just a series of trenches, but an entire subterranean world with living quarters, hospitals, weapons factories, and command centers. The Viet Cong literally lived, fought, and planned operations right under the enemy's feet. The legendary treasure of Captain Kidd was indeed found, but not in the way of fairy tales. The story of Kidd, the pirate who supposedly buried untold riches and left mysterious maps, became the template for all pirate stories. For 300 years, the treasure was considered a myth. However, before sailing to New York to try to clear his name, Captain Kidd made a stop at Gardiner's Island off the coast of Long Island. He did bury treasure there, but not as a secret. He entrusted it to the island's owner, John Gardiner, for safekeeping. After Kidd's execution, the authorities sailed to the island and seized the enormous hoard of gold, silver, and valuable fabrics.
Actor Mads Mikkelsen's ancestor was a real Danish pirate. This sounds like an internet joke, but it is absolutely true. The famous Danish actor, known for his roles as iconic antagonists, genuinely has a buccaneer in his lineage. His direct ancestor, a man named Mindert Nordstrand, was a notorious pirate and privateer operating in the Baltic Sea in the 15th century. Nordstrand was no small-time raider. He commanded his own ship and caused serious trouble for the Danish authorities and merchant vessels before being caught and convicted. His charisma and penchant for the dramatic may well have been inherited from a genuine seafaring ancestor. Your likes, comments, and subscription are an incredible support and my biggest motivation. Thank you for pushing this channel forward. See you soon.